Hello and welcome or welcome back to the channel. My name is Professor G. I'm a law professor and a historian, and my area of scholarly focus and research is on the slave laws and slave codes that maintained and sustained the antebellum slaveocracy, the slave society that was the antebellum South that eventually became the Confederate States of America. And to that end, I started this YouTube channel to try and help educate people as to the horrors of the slaveocracy, of what slavery really was from a legal perspective, going through all of the court decisions and cases and opinions of state Supreme Courts that you found during the duration of the antebellum South. And when you study these cases, you realize how horrific the system actually was. Well, that slowly developed into when I saw Confederate sympathizers and defenders of Confederate heroes and monuments of coming out and trying to expose these people for who they truly were. And I inevitably kicked a wasp's nest here. And as soon as I did a video about General Lee and how he was in fact a monster, not the person that he was made out to be through revisionist historians, that video was attacked by neo-Confederates, neo-Nazis, the alt-right. If they have a stereotypical group for people who are absolutely insane on the political right, those individuals came out en masse to attack that video, okay? Well, I mean, I don't care. It is what it is. But the funny thing is, and I've seen this as I've continued to make more videos, specifically the last one on Graham Hancock, that nowhere in that video did I say anything disparaging against Matt Walsh, because that General Lee video was in response to Matt Walsh's video of General Lee being a hero. I didn't discredit Matt Walsh. I discredited Robert E. Lee. If Robert E. Lee is offended, he can come challenge me to a duel, and I will meet him like a man on the field of battle at dusk with single-shot pistols or whatever weapon he chooses. Now, since he's long gone, of course, that's not going to happen. But the anger that comes from the people who try and defend enslavers and the system that they fought and many of them died to protect and maintain is astonishing to me. And that's really what this video rant is about. This video is going to be very different from some of the other videos I've made. It's kind of just a rant, and I'm really reaching out to many of the other YouTube influencers here on this platform who do combat pseudo-history, pseudo-science, pseudo-archaeology, and I've had the privilege of being able to communicate with a few of them directly here on YouTube. Dr. Flint Dibble is one. He's been so kind to take time from his day to email me back. Professor Dave actually emailed me back within 30 minutes of when I reached out to him asking for advice on, what do I do in light of these attacks, or how do I continue to promote, fighting revisionist history. And they've been great. And there's many others, too, who I've reached out to as well, and I want to show my appreciation to them. But, it's amazing to me the anger that comes from the community that supports revisionist historians and pseudoscience. So, forgetting the video on Robert E. Lee, because I'm sure all of you are aware out there that there are Confederate sympathizers to this day. That's not really surprising. And there's very little, we can do except continue to expose how horrible the Confederacy was, how horrible slavery was, how horrible these people who fought to defend it were. And we keep pushing the narrative of truth, of true history, in order to combat the Confederate worship in today's day and age here in the United States. Because since the Trump administration, it seems that the green light is turned on, the door has been open to all the crazy racist neo-Confederates, neo-Nazis, Confederate sympathizers to come out and say some pretty horrific things. And, like I said, in the video itself, I didn't talk about anyone I didn't offend anyone who's alive today. But everyone in the comments sure was offended, and then started doing things like calling me a Jew and that this is a Jew conspiracy and all sorts of other anti-Semitic things. And, like I said, it is what it is. I'm merely putting the truth out. They can get as offended as they want. But then it really surprised me, and it really shouldn't have, because I've been following so many of these, actual scientists and historians here on YouTube who are trying to also combat these people. But I made the video of Graham Hancock. And what I said was Graham Hancock's theory of this original civilization founded in racist ideology? And we know the answer to this is yes. And I said that what Graham Hancock is doing is dangerous because, as he said, and as he's come out and made clear on I believe, Joe Rogan, you can find many clips of him saying this, there is no evidence of an advanced civilization that existed before all others, that seeded and disseminated information to all these indigenous people, allowing them to do these amazing things. So he's pushing a narrative that has no evidence to back it up. And I said this is dangerous because it is rooted in racist ideology, which many other people on this platform have already explained. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I took what I know, my area of research, which is slave laws and slave codes of the antebellum South. And I explained in that video that what Graham Hancock is doing is what the enslavers in the antebellum South did in order to justify slavery. And they made it clear slavery in the antebellum South was entirely based on race. And I've even had people comment on some of these videos saying, no, it wasn't. It wasn't based on race. It was never based on race. You know, and plus, blacks who were enslaved had it exponentially better than free working people in Europe. You know who also said that? Plenty of racist enslavers in the antebellum South. That was, in fact, one of their arguments to continue to maintain slavery. It was how good slaves have it. They're not treated like the poor whites of Europe. They have everything taken care of for them. Therefore, slavery is great. But above and beyond that ridiculous argument was the argument that slavery was the natural condition for Africans, for black people, for people of African descent. And that because of their natural condition, that is where they thrived, that is where they belonged, and because of that, there was nothing inherently wrong with slavery, right? Well, to justify that, these jurists, and again, this is what's terrifying. I always cite to this book. I've read it a million times. I've written papers using this book, An Inquiry into the Law of Negro Slavery in the United States of America by Thomas R. Cobb. You know, they had to justify that whites were a superior race, white supremacy, and because whites are superior and blacks were inferior, and blacks benefited from the system of slavery, then slavery was theretofore good. Well, one of the things they then had to show was that all good things could only come from white people, right? Because if black people, if people of African descent could create, could explore, could develop things, could have societies, could have, governments and political systems and art and culture and history and all that, if they could do that removed from slavery, then slavery was not their natural condition and it wasn't good for them. So you could not have civilizations in Africa that developed religion and writing systems and culture and math and identity and or whatever, all the things that these societies developed on their own. You could not have that according to the white supremacist ideology and still maintain a system of slavery, because if people of African descent could do better outside of that system, then clearly it wasn't their natural state to be in. So that is what these jurists and pseudoscientists and people did during the antebellum period, from the early republic all the way up to the Civil War. They justified that people of African descent, Africans in Africa, were barbaric. They never created anything. They never had civilization. They never had society. They never had science. They never had math. They never did anything. They couldn't create religion. And any time whites came and attempted to civilize them, as soon as whites left, they relapsed back into barbarism. So the idea that indigenous people cannot create and cannot come up with magnificent, incredible things unless there was this prehistoric advanced civilization that gave them the means and the fuel and the understanding to do it is dangerous, because that's exactly what these white supremacists did to justify enslaving people of African descent. So nowhere in that video did I ever say that Graham Hancock was racist. And I've seen Dr. Dibble deal with this. I've seen Milo and Mini Minuteman discuss this. I've seen Professor Dave talk about this. All of the people who actually try and confront what Graham Hancock is doing get accused of calling him a racist. I don't think he's a racist. I think he overlooks or chooses to ignore the fact that this was racist. This is racist ideology, the idea of this prehistoric civilization that existed. And someone pointed out that in one of his early books, it even said a light-skinned people in this civilization. I can't cite to that. I can't quote that. Take it for what it is. But even without that, this idea that indigenous people could do nothing for themselves is what fuels this idea that, oh, because this group can and this group can't, that group must be superior, which gives them license to do, unfortunately, in the world of history, some very horrible things. So again, I don't understand why so many supporters of pseudo-historians and pseudoscientists come to videos like mine on Graham Hancock and get personally offended by the fact that we're going to call them out on this. And we're going to go back in history and say, look at this, right? And then you get these really weird defenses. You know, people post on my videos on slave law all the time. You know, thank God the Republicans freed the slaves from those racist Democrats. And I always answer, you know, so what? Everyone was racist back then. Democrats, Republicans, the North were just as racist as the South. What does the Democrats having to be racist in the antebellum period have anything to do with the price of tea in China today, right? I got news for you guys. This is the United States of America. In 1776 and in 1787, when the Constitution was written, everybody was racist, okay? Everybody. Even the abolitionists, for the most part, were racist. Welcome to America. We were founded pretty much on white supremacy. What do you want? I mean, what's the argument there by saying that the South was controlled by Democrats? Yeah, they were, of course. Or that the fact that many in the North were not fighting to end slavery. Of course not. The Civil War, at the outset of it, was fought to preserve the Union. It only became about slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation in 63 because there needed to be a political spin on this to continue the war and to keep it going and to give it another, you know, another mission as opposed to just reuniting the Union, and also making it about ending slavery kept European powers like England from getting involved and recognizing the Confederacy. So, yes, this was all political. And yes, everyone, I say everyone, of course, it's hyperbole, but for the most part, everyone was a blatant racist, right? So what does that have to do, again, with the fact that the system of slavery was absolutely horrific and the antebellum South was a slave society, not a society with slaves that existed for the sole purpose of continuing and maintaining and perpetuating the system of African slavery? But I guess my point in this rant is I'm amazed when I go look at the Graham Hancock video that I posted yesterday, and it's doing well. At the time I'm making this video, it has like 200 views, which is big for this channel. This is a small, meaningless channel. I'm a small fish in a big pond. But I am very thankful for the support I'm getting from many of the bigger influencers here on YouTube. But the butthurt that supporters of pseudo-historians, how butthurt they get, is astonishing to me. Because nowhere in that video did I offend or did I claim that Graham Hancock is a racist. I said the ideology of his ancient civilization is absolutely based in white supremacy, and I proved it by showing that it is exactly the same ideology that was used by enslavers in the antebellum South. In the Robert E. Lee video, I did nothing but expose Robert E. Lee for being the monster enslaver that he was, who went to court to try and keep his father-in-law's slaves that he inherited from being freed in accordance with his father-in-law's will, so he could work them harder to pay off his father-in-law's debts, where he brutally ordered the whipping of 3 of his slaves, a punishment that was so severe that his own overseer refused to do it. So he had to hire a local constable to administer the punishment, ordering the constable to lay it on well, and then having the wounds washed with brine. And again, this account is record. You can find it. You can look it up. It's pretty easy to find. And it was given by one of the slaves who was whipped after the Civil War. During the time that Robert E. Lee was still alive, Robert E. Lee was well aware that it was published in many newspapers, and guess who never refuted that the story actually happened or took place? Robert E. Lee. So, but when I point how Robert E. Lee was a monster, the neo-Confederates and neo-Nazis and Confederate sympathizers get so like viscerally angry and butthurt that it becomes a personal attack on me and Judaism for some reason, and things like that. But again, you know, it merely, again, like I said, this is a 14-minute round. I'm going to end it here. But thank you all for your support. I appreciate it. Please remember to like, subscribe, share the channel. I'm going to continue to post videos discussing specific court cases in the antebellum South that show how horrific the system of slavery was, while at the same time, if I do see issues of people like Graham Hancock or other pseudo-historians using certain things that have these racial connotations to it, I will continue, to tie it to the slave laws and slave codes of the antebellum South to show you how these jurists, these enslavers, use those same line of thinking, that same ideology to justify slavery in the slaveocracy that was the antebellum South and eventually the Confederate States of America. So thanks again for your support. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you for the next video.